I think we're just about ready to get started. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Ann Lodge. I am a high school guidance counselor in Medfield. We have a lot of great panelists on our call today, and we're so happy to welcome our juniors and their families who are joining us this evening for our first virtual junior panel evening. We've held them in person in the past, and we're excited to be able to still offer the opportunity this year, just in a different format. So thanks to all of you for taking a little bit of time out of your night to join us. Families at home, you will obviously notice my face and Mrs. Worthley's face, the familiar Medfield High School staff that are here. We also have the rest of our counseling staff listening in on the phone. Just to review the alphabetical breakdown for you guys, and you're aware, so Stephanie Worthley is our guidance department head, and she works with juniors whose last names start with A through BO. Elise DeLuzio is working with our juniors' last names BR through E. I have students with last names F through L. Amanda Patton has students' last names M through Q. And Eric Ornberg, students with last names R through Z. So they are all listening in and joining us this evening. As we work through this panel, we're going to ask the college representatives to share a little bit of information about their schools, and then also to delve into some more about the admission process and what things look like from the college perspective, and share their advice and tips with all of you guys as you're starting to navigate this process. As you know, we have not had the opportunity to see you guys in person in classroom sessions yet this year, unfortunately, but we did share out a number of screencasts earlier this fall and early winter to share a lot of information with you guys about the admission process. We want to continue this conversation as we move throughout the rest of the winter and the spring, and as you guys are navigating whatever your future plans may look like. And tonight's a great opportunity to hear about things from the college side. So we're really, really excited to have our panelists join us. I'm going to introduce them in a minute, but just wanted to mention, for housekeeping purposes, this video is being recorded, so it will be shared out with families afterwards in case you have to jump off early or your internet connection is not as good as ours at school per se. So we're excited to invite everyone also to ask any questions that they might have in the Q&A. You do have the opportunity to ask things there for the general population, that we will address them at the end if they haven't already been addressed at some point throughout the evening. If you have more individual questions, please make sure that you're reaching out to your guidance counselor, your child's guidance counselor, so that we can help support you in this process. So without further ado, I am going to introduce everyone, and then afterwards I'll call you out by name, college reps, to ask you to share a little bit about your school. So first joining us is Alexis Jackson from Clemson University. Alexis, you want to give a wave? Thank you. We also have Drew Carter joining us from College of the Holy Cross. Rachel Bukowski joining us from UMass Amherst. Erica Polner joining us from the University of Vermont, and Nick Walkowitz joining us from Northeastern University. So thank you guys very much. Alexis, do you want to start us off and just share a little bit about Clemson with the Medfield families?
Yes, I can. So good afternoon, you guys. Again, my name is Alexis Jackson, and I am one of the freshman admissions counselors here at Clemson University. So a little bit about Clemson. I'm going to tell you about student life and the university, and then of course we'll get into all the admission stuff later. So Clemson is university is located in Clemson, South Carolina. So yes, there is a place called Clemson, South Carolina. Some people don't know that. I get that question all the time. So Clemson is about 1,400 acres, and we are surrounded by over 100 miles of Lake Hartwell. So usually during the hotter months in the summer, you'll see a lot of our students out on the lake, running around the lake. They're on their boats, they're on their friends' boats. They do a lot of swimming as well. So Clemson is also a college town. So if you're looking for that college town feel, you'll get that here at Clemson. And then right across the street is downtown Clemson. So downtown Clemson is just one street long, so it's not large. So we have just over 25,000 students, closer to 26,000 students. So we are a mid to large size university. However, Clemson doesn't feel that large just because campus is not spread out all over the town of Clemson. So you can get from one side of campus to the other side of campus in about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how fast you're walking. The other great thing about Clemson is that since we are so walkable, you have an 8 a.m. class, you're running late, your class is right outside of your dorm room. So you won't really necessarily be late unless you're going all the way to the other side of the campus. And then we have over 550 different student clubs and organizations for you guys to get involved with. So you're never going to be bored at Clemson because there's always some kind of event that an organization is hosting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexis. Drew, you want to share a little bit about Holy Cross for us?
Hey everybody, I'm Drew Carter from Holy Cross. It is great to be here tonight. And by here, I mean talking to you from my home. I work for the great school, Holy Cross. Holy Cross is in Worcester, Massachusetts. You have a great variety of schools represented here tonight. I think we would be the small school representative. Holy Cross, we have 3,000 students. So if you're thinking big, medium, and small, 3,000, particularly in New England terms, puts us kind of right in the middle of the small school family. We're completely undergraduate. So every building you see is for undergraduates. Every student you see is an undergraduate. Every professor is there just to instruct undergraduate students. So no med school, no law school, no graduate courses at all. We're also a residential school. So we tend to attract the kind of student who pictures themselves living on campus as a part of a community for their college experience. Close to 95% of our students will live on campus. We have enough housing for all 4 years. And that just tends to be the kind of student that we attract, who sees themselves as being part of a community. We're a liberal arts school, and I could probably spend an hour trying to define liberal arts, not successfully. But at Holy Cross, very simply, that just means there's a wide variety of academic offerings. One piece that's a little unique is that every student enters Holy Cross without a major. We want students to have ideas about what they want to study, and we let them pursue those paths on day one, but everybody does so undeclared without a major. And we will hope that students will declare their major more likely during their sophomore year, having taken classes in their areas of interest. Holy Cross is a great place. The last thing I'll say is Worcester is a great college town. We're only 3,000 students, but there's close to 40,000 college students in the city of Worcester from all the other colleges. So it is a great place to go to college.
Thank you, Drew. Rachel, can you share with us some information about UMass and the Amherst campus specifically?
Yes, definitely. So hi, everyone. Also, thank you for virtually having me. I appreciate that, and I am excited to be here. So I am one of the assistant directors of admission for the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So I'll be speaking about UMass specifically, but then you'll hear me talk about the state system in general, and just kind of the way the state reads applications for all the state schools. So I'll be mentioning that a couple times. You'll hear me kind of speak for all the schools in the state of Massachusetts, all the public schools, I should say. So UMass Amherst is a flagship campus for the state of Massachusetts. So as most of you are aware, there are 5 UMass campuses, including a med school, and UMass Amherst is the flagship. So we're kind of known as kind of the main campus, the flagship for the state. We have about 24,000 undergraduate students. And actually the way Alexis was describing Clemson is the way I describe UMass. So it's funny, I'm going to kind of echo her here, even though we're 2 very different schools and 2 very different locations, but the way she was describing her campus is the way I describe UMass. So we're also located in a college town. Amherst is about an hour and a half to 2 hours or so from Boston. So from, very, similar from you guys. And then we're about 3.5 hours from New York City. And Amherst is a college town, and Western Massachusetts is very much, the pocket we're in is the Pioneer Valley. And so Amherst is, there's this kind of abundance of college students in this one area because we're also part of a 5-college consortium. So what that means is that we're associated with 4 other schools just in our little area. So those other 4 schools are Amherst College, Mount Holyoke College, Hampshire College, and Smith College. So we're the large public out of this consortium, and the other 4 are the small privates. And so there are a lot of college students in this area. And the town of Amherst is actually a smaller town. There's about 30,000 residents in the town of Amherst. So when the college students come back to campus in a normal year, I know we're talking about, I know this is a COVID year, so it's a little different, but in a normal year, Amherst doubles, the town doubles because of all the college students, more than doubles because of the college students that are here. We have over 100 different majors. We're Division I for athletics. And I'll talk, a little bit more about the competitive programs probably a little bit later on. And then my favorite fact about UMass, besides that we're part of a 5-college consortium, is that we're #1 for best food in the entire country. It's something we're really proud of and something we take really seriously. It sounds like it's like a fun, kind of stat, but our food is really, really good. We don't joke about it. It's very serious here. It's a very, something we're very proud of. So if you do get a chance to visit, which I hope you all do at some point when all this is over, you definitely have to eat in one of our dining halls. It's literally the best. So.
That sounds great, Rachel. Thank you. Erica, can you share with us a little bit about University of Vermont, please?
Absolutely. So the University of Vermont, we are a medium-sized public research institution. We're located in Burlington, Vermont, so another college town. Lot to do in the area. It's only about maybe a 3.5 to 4 hour drive from where you are now. We offer over 100 different majors housed within 7 colleges and schools, specialties ranging from nursing to business to engineering, environmental science, education, and a lot of options in between. And then most of our major options are housed within our liberal arts college. UVM also offers over 35 accelerated master's degree programs, which provide students a pathway to achieving their master's degree in a total 5 years of study. UVM is considered one of the nation's top green universities due to our strong academic, research, and community focus on sustainability and conservation. Our community also strongly values diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is shown in our curriculum requirements and in our campus resources, like our 4 identity centers. Each one is focused on a different area of identity, so race, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. And they work with students to provide specialized resources and support systems. As for athletics, UVM is Division I school, so we have 18 D1 teams, and our most popular sports for spectators are basketball and hockey. There also is a really big ski and snowboard culture here at UVM, but generally speaking, outdoor recreation as a whole is very popular here. UVM also has over 300 student-led clubs and organizations. So even as something as kind of out there as like beekeeping is one of our clubs. And also study abroad is very popular here. We offer over 500 programs in over 70 countries. And I think that's all I wanted to mention now. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Thank you, Erica. And Nick, do you want to wrap up our college overviews, talking a little bit about Northeastern?
Yeah, I would love to. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to, again, virtually be here. I'm logging in from Medway, so just down the road from you guys. So if this were in person, it would not be a bad commute for me. So either way, I'm happy. I work at Northeastern University in Boston, and Northeastern is a mid to large size private university. It's around 16,000 undergraduate students, so kind of right in the middle. We offer, I think the one thing about Northeastern that makes us, I think, unique from every other college in the country is our co-op program and how intensely we embrace it and kind of work with our students to use it. And what co-op is students at Northeastern will have the opportunity to work for 6 months at a time during their college career and really work a full-time job and kind of see how their career fits on them in a very intense, really full-time working position anywhere in the world. So currently around 3,000 different employers will host Northeastern students. You can do up to 3 different co-ops during your time at Northeastern. So that's up to 18 months of work on your resume before you graduate, which leads to our students just really knowing what they want to do before they graduate, not just because of the experience and kind of the things they're doing when they're on the road, but when they are learning about themselves, kind of why they're learning what they're learning, and if it's right for them or not. It can lead to changing majors or kind of reconfirming majors, things like that. So I find Northeastern students are students that do end up knowing what they want and kind of why they want it. One other interesting kind of topic about Northeastern is that we offer a lot of combined majors. So majors that really combine the merits of 2 different disciplines in very, very specific ways, right? So majors like graphic design combined with computer science to make video game design, or marketing and psychology. So 2 pretty disparate things combined to make a very specific major kind of built for students that really do know what they want from the get-go, or think they do, because they will change their major at least usually once or twice during the time at Northeastern or really any college. We are located, of course, in Boston, so we are right downtown. We have a pretty cohesive college campus, a very traditional college campus right in the heart of the city. So kind of combining the best of both worlds, I think, where And we have that like very safe, secure, walkable campus. But at the same time, we have 4 key stops on campus, and we're kind of right in the middle of everything, right near Symphony Hall, right next to the MFA. So I'm sure you've heard of us or kind of been around campus just being from Medfield, but we do embrace kind of all that Boston has to offer while being separate from it a little bit as well. I'm happy to talk more as well about my college for hours if I had it, but I look forward to kind of getting more into the weeds of the admissions process in a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much. This is great information. I think, as you can imagine, well, you guys are deep in reading season right now for applications for the current senior class. Our juniors are in the process of exploring what is going to be a good fit for them for moving forward. So sort of with that in mind, and through the lens of COVID, that is restricting travel options for students, and in many cases, the ability to visit campuses in person. We're wondering if you can talk a little bit about how students might get a good feel for your campus or other campuses without having the opportunity to visit in person. Drew, do you want to start off with that one? Would you mind?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that's worth knowing, and everyone here could speak to this, and this would be probably news to the parents here, is that every college in the country, probably the world, has gone to great lengths over the last 9 months to mobilize their virtual recruitment efforts. The way college websites have been transformed over the last 9 months is staggering. I've been, as part of my job, I've been monitoring certainly our school, but other schools as well, and the changes are incredible. So one thing worth knowing is that there is so much information for you now on a school's website, not just the list of majors, not just like list of student clubs and activities. There are now virtual events you can sign up for. There are ways to take virtual tours and listen to tour guides. There are ways to sign up for virtual information sessions and listen to admissions counselors and listen to student tour guides speak. In some ways, there is more information accessible to you now than has ever been before. And that really opens up the geography. You can attend an information session any school in the country tomorrow afternoon if you wanted. So my advice really is to revisit schools' websites if you have not in the last 6 months, because trust me, what you will find is incredible resources and opportunities to connect and hear from admissions counselors and current students in ways in which you never could before. And I'll say the one thing that we have learned the most is that prospective students and their parents are really valuing hearing from current students as a part of virtual tours or virtual information sessions. So look for those opportunities to hear from and connect with current students at colleges and hear about their experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Does anyone else want to add anything different to that?
I'll just echo what Drew just said, right? Where we've basically been running a TV station out of Northeastern's Office of Admissions for the last several months, right? Because we are always filming something, posting it online. There are literally hundreds of hours of content on our website that has never been there before. So there are a few perks of COVID, and this is one of them that I hope we take with us for college admissions kind of in the years to come, because there's a lot of content on there for you. Whatever major you're interested in, you're kind of sitting in classes, live or recorded sessions. There's a ton of content, not just for Northeastern, but for, I'm sure, every school, right? Where you guys, we didn't quite luck out with this year, but it's got its perks, right?
Awesome. Thank you. I think it definitely does. I know I've had the opportunity to, even attend counselor events to so many more schools than I typically would, just given the accessibility of being able to do it online this year. So it's a little bit different than walking on a campus and exploring it in person, but there are so many great opportunities that are out there. Thank you guys for echoing that. That's helpful. Our juniors are also at the point where pretty soon, within the next several weeks, they're going to be starting to think about what courses they're going to take as seniors. And inevitably, every year, freshman year through junior year, when they're picking senior year classes, we end up having conversations with families about sort of that give and take between challenging oneself and taking really hard courses with potentially grades that might be a little bit lower than what they might be taking if they what they might be earning if they took a course that wasn't quite as challenging for them. And I think families are often looking for that feedback from us about trying to find that sweet spot. Where is that mix between challenging themselves enough, but sort of not overburdening themselves, and still being able to put forward an application that they feel is really competitive for the admission process. I'm wondering if anyone wants to speak a little bit to that from what you've seen from the admission side of things, and any recommendations that you might have for juniors and their families as they're starting to think about those senior year courses. Erica, do you want to start maybe with that one?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd say that this is a very nuanced conversation. And so my advice is always to just reach out, like, don't be a stranger, reach out to your territory manager and say, like, this is my intended field. This is what I want to major in. I'm really interested in your school. And I'm wondering what insight you have, like, between like these two classes I'm between for next semester. It's never going to be like perfect advice, I don't think, but it's such an individual conversation. I hesitate to say that one is definitively better than the other.
Yeah, I'll jump in if that's all right. I mean, I think I again echo that it's very individual. I think in the end, from my personal experience, it's helped students to, first of all, like, don't overextend yourself, don't go crazy senior year. If you're on the right track, you're on the right track. I have seen very few students who have gone from, let's say, like a deny from Northeastern to an admit from Northeastern because of their senior year schedule, right? So like, stay on the track you're on and kind of hope that that's going to get you where you want to be. And I think on the back half of that is students who are, let's say you're admitted to Northeastern and you have grades coming in the second semester of your senior year that you worry about kind of losing that admission, for example. I've seen a lot of fear of that, of like, let's say I'm an A student and I get a B+ or a B in my senior year AP Chem course or whatever it might be. I've seen a lot of fear over that, and I can speak to just hopefully assuage that, right? Where Northeastern, we are looking at you to maintain the track you're on. Don't go from a C student to an A student, right? We can't expect that. Don't fail classes senior year, but kind of stay on the basic track you're on. And in the end, like a B+ is not going to lead to a rescind of an admission, right? So kind of like balancing of fear. You shouldn't be afraid of taking an advanced course. Don't take courses you won't do well in, but stay on the track that you are on. Again, it's pretty vague advice, I guess, but it's a personal thing.
Can I just add one thing too? I totally agree with everything my colleagues just said. The only thing I want to add is I told you I'm going to speak about the state system a couple times here. So the one thing I want to add about that is also you just need to, if you're planning on applying to one of the state universities here in Massachusetts, you just need to make sure you are still meeting the state requirements, which are pretty much the same as your graduation requirements. So that 4 years of English. The one that pops up for us the most though is the 4 years of math. Students sometimes think they can drop that 4th year of math, but the requirement is actually 4 years of math plus math in the senior year. So even if you took like a college math course or you took something in like 8th grade, that counts. That's great and wonderful, but it's still, you still have to have that math in the senior year. And most high schools are following that, but we do get a couple random, situations where students will want to drop math or something like that. So speak to your guidance counselors. You have a great guidance team here, a great school counseling team. So just speak to them. They'll be able to guide you and help you. So I just wanted to mention that about the state system. And that's for all the state schools in Massachusetts.
In a similar vein as well, sorry to jump in again, I'm talking a lot. So if anyone has anything better to say, please interrupt me. But basically, we will also look at, like, if you drop a foreign language, for example, what is it replaced with? So we're very aware of that, of like, how is your schedule changing year to year? And if you drop, again, let's say you drop Latin and you double up on science, that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? So it's a kind of, what do you replace that class with that can help or hurt you, I think.
Thank you guys. That's really helpful feedback to hear from all of you guys, especially as we enter that course selection process for juniors. As students are beginning to figure out what schools they might be interested in moving forward, we definitely have a lot of conversations with students as well about majors. And sometimes they're in between majors, sometimes they're dead set on one, and sometimes they're really far away from that point in the process, which we always encourage that exploration and beginning to think about things. But I do think that a lot of students end up having questions about how they should best present themselves on an admissions application. Is it better to sort of pick a major, even if they're not 100% sure that's the direction they want to move in? Or is it better to steer clear of that? And what does it look like if they were to put down undecided on the common application in that major area? How is that viewed from the admission perspective? And I know this is something that might be a little bit different from school to school, particularly where there are schools here that might have different colleges dedicated within their university setting dedicated to different areas. So I'm actually going to ask everyone to speak to this a little bit just to get a wide range of perspectives. Alexis, if you don't mind kicking us off with this question, that'd be great.
Yeah, so at Clemson, you do have to declare your major when you are applying. So on the application, you're actually going to put down your major choices. So you have the opportunity to put down 2 different choices of major on the application, because some of our majors are limited space and they're a little bit more competitive to get into. So you always want to make sure you have a backup choice. So maybe you want to go into maybe like health science, which is one of our more competitive majors. We want to put down a backup choice. So that way, if you're not admissible into health science that year coming in, you can always possibly get into Clemson coming in as your second choice of major. You can choose undecided. So just because you do have to declare a major, declaring undecided is totally fine. You're not looked at any different. So if you are floating between 2 different majors, you're not completely sure. So maybe you have an inkling of what you want to do. Maybe you're interested in the sciences, but you're also interested in psychology. It is really, really easy to change your major at Clemson. You can change your major once you apply. You can change your major after you get your decision. You can change your major at orientation, and you can change your major throughout the year. So you have plenty of opportunities to discover what you're interested in. I mean, I went to Clemson and I changed my major 3 times and my minor twice, and I still graduated on time. So don't be afraid of choosing something that you're not particularly sure about, because you can always get out of it. Unless you're choosing one of our more competitive majors, it's going to be an application process. So you're going to have to apply directly to that program once you're enrolled at Clemson.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. Drew?
Whatever you list on the application for your intended area of study, we ignore it because you will enter undeclared. You get to take those classes day 1. You get to walk down that path in that major, but you do so not having committed yourself. So we'll just ignore whatever you put down.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, so ours is also really similar to Clemson. I love this. This is a nice team thing we got going on here. So we on the Common App, excuse me, we have you pick your first and second choice major. Just as Alexis was saying, you do want to pick a second choice so that if you're not admissible to your first choice, we can review you for your second choice. Now, what I recommend for UMass is to pick something different. So a lot of students will put down the same, 2 different majors, but in the same school or college. So maybe you'll put down like chemical engineering as your first choice major and then mechanical engineering as your second choice. I know those are 2 different majors, but they're in the same school or college. So the requirements for that major are exactly the same. The same goes for, management and marketing, or sport management and management. Those are, I know, 2 different majors, but they're in the same school or college. So pick something else. If you put down mechanical engineering as your first choice, pick math as your second choice or something like that. So that's just one kind of little, thing that's a little different here at UMass. But I just recommend, if you're going to put down, or when you put down a second choice, just pick something different so we can review you for that if you're not admissible to your first choice. We do have competitive majors, like kind of what Alexis was saying. So there is every major you are able to transfer into here at UMass, except for nursing. Nursing is the one major that we have where we do not accept transfer students internally or externally. So that's the one major you actually do have to put down as your first choice major. Nursing is also the one program where we don't look at you for your second choice. So it's a little bit different, unlike the other ones where we will look at you for a second choice. So unfortunately, that means if you put down nursing as your first choice major and you're not admitted to nursing, you'll unfortunately most likely be denied from the university. Sometimes waitlisted, but most likely denied. Now, with all that kind of being said, I also just want to add that I strongly encourage students to, if you are now on the opposite end, if you don't know what you want to do, if you're still trying to figure it out, This is actually my favorite question. I strongly encourage you to come in undeclared, or at least for us, ours isn't called undeclared. We have exploratory tracks, which is basically just undeclared. And really try to figure that out while you're at college. And that's for all colleges and universities, not just UMass. If you don't know what you want to do, you will figure it out when you're here, okay? That's in what I believe what college is for, is to figure that out. You're gonna hear students say all the time, like what Alexa said, changing your major is very, very common at college. It's very common to change your major, pick up a minor. There's tracks, there's certificate programs, there's majors you've never even heard of yet. And you probably won't hear of until you get to a college campus. Okay, so I'd just like to throw that out there, that if you're undecided or undeclared, you don't know, you're trying to decide between a couple different things, you'll figure that out when you're here. And then the one thing I want to just end on is it's really important to reach out. You're going to hear us say this a couple times. It's really important to reach out to the schools you're applying to, because you just heard me talk about nursing. That's specific to UMass. That could be totally different at UVM, or Clemson. It's going to be different, where you apply. So it's really important, if you're interested in a major and you know that major might be competitive or different, or it's a specialty, check in with the school you're applying to see what those different requirements are, because they're going to be different at every school.
Thank you, Rachel. Erica?
Yeah, so we like to joke that undeclared is our most popular first year major at UVM. It is what most students tend to come in. Not most students, but it's the largest population of students come in undeclared. I mentioned before that we have the 7 different colleges and schools. 5 of them offer undeclared as an option. So you can apply undeclared into, say, the College of Education and Social Services. Maybe you want to be a teacher, but you don't know yet whether you want to do secondary ed or elementary ed. And one of the colleges that doesn't offer undeclared is business, which only has 1 major, which is business administration. And then our College of Nursing and Health Sciences doesn't have an undeclared option. But generally speaking, I would say that there's a lot of time to figure out what you want to do. It's hard to know that when you're 17 years old. Speaking personally, I changed my major and college going into my 3rd year at UVM. So really those first 2 years can be used for a lot of exploration, and you're not tied to the college that you enter in. But similar to what we've heard before, the 2 majors that are really difficult to switch into are nursing and any of our engineering majors. Just because, nursing doesn't offer a lot of space, and engineering is very structured. So you may have to take on more semesters depending on when you decide to transfer. So those first 2 years can be used for a lot of exploration. You're not tied to the college or major that you come in on. And I would just say additionally that, depending on the major, we're going to look at applicants differently. So if you are a student, something that I see I'd say pretty frequently is students applying to be a business major who don't have the strongest math record. So that's something to consider. I don't think a lot of students are thinking about math when they put business as their major choice, but it's something that we're paying attention to. So if you're applying to a major that has that kind of association, just maybe look at your transcript and think about if it looks like a good fit. What I'd say for UVM is that, if you're really into business, but you may have a few like C's on your math record, if you want to enter undeclared and try to work your way into the business program, that would be an option. But talking to the admissions is going to be helpful to get to know the different schools' nuances.
Thank you, Erica. Nick?
Yeah, sure. Similar to all the other schools here, I think there's no downside to coming in undeclared. We call it our Explore program, but really it's our undeclared program, right? Where a lot of students will come in and explore, kind of feel out their first year or two. I think at the end of your sophomore year should be, your final major should be chosen, ideally just to make things easier on yourself. I think our best advisors are in our Explore program or our undeclared option, just because they are so good at helping students find their track and find their passion, right? And I think it helps to have not one major necessarily, but maybe a top 3. Like, I'm interested in business and computer science, maybe engineering and things like that. They can help you and kind of take courses in those subjects and figure out which one's right for you. So having that kind of narrowed down a little bit helps a lot. I think some of our very specific majors lend themselves to starting early as well. So those combined majors I mentioned before, the earlier you can start those, a little bit the better. But in the end, undeclared is always a good option. At Northeastern, at least, we have a guaranteed change of major policy as well. So any major is open, you can change as easily as like the next day if you want to. So it's quite simple. We think every student will do it. I think at least once at Northeastern, probably change their track or their major completely. So yeah, really no downside.
Thank you guys a lot. That was wonderful information. I think really helpful too for families to hear that things might shift and change from school to school. So to make sure that they're doing their research, reaching out and having conversations with the admission representatives at the schools that they're interested in, and exploring your websites is really the best way to get information. So thank you guys so much for sharing those insights with us. I want to talk a little bit about the admission process as it pertains to deadlines. So the differences between early action, early decision, regular decision. We've shared all of that information with families, so they should have at least a basic understanding of that at this point. But as they're beginning to make those decisions for how they're thinking about applying to colleges, we do often get questions about how applications are viewed. Are they evaluated differently depending on how they apply or when they apply? And again, I feel like there are nuances from school to school that will take place throughout this entire process with every question that we ask. But I'm wondering if someone wants to speak a little bit to the differences maybe at their particular institution between ED, EA, or regular decision. Does anyone want to take that one to start?
I can start us
Alexa,
off.
thank you.
So Clemson's admissions process is honestly super easy. We do not participate in early action or early decision or anything like that. We only have priority deadline, and that just means that as long as you send in your application by December 1st and complete the admissions process by December 31st by sending in your test scores and transcripts to us, you're automatically going to be reviewed for scholarships and your guaranteed response by mid-February. So it doesn't matter if you apply when our application first opens up in August, or if you apply in November, you're going to get a response by mid-February. The only time you do want to apply early, just because housing is based off your application date. So the earlier you apply, the better housing time ticket you'll get. So that's the benefits of applying early. But other than that, it's just all regular admissions. And so you're not looked at differently if you apply in August versus November.
Thanks, Alexis.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I like doing these sessions because I went to UVM and I work at UVM. So this is the only time I get to learn about how different schools operate. So UVM, we have early action and regular decisions. So early action deadline November 1st. You have the following 2 weeks to get the supplemental materials to us. And that we call a priority priority completion deadline, because if your test scores get to us after that 2-week period, it's okay. We just can't guarantee the same decision release date. And then same goes for our regular decision round, which has the application deadline of January 15th. There is not a, you're not more likely to get a certain decision based on which time frame you choose. But I think a benefit of applying early action is that, in early action, we're going to send out admit decisions. We'll send out maybe a few denies, but a lot of students who aren't able to be admitted off the bat will be deferred to regular decision. With specific instructions to, we want to hear more from you, maybe write a letter of interest, send us updated grades, reach out to us. And so I think kind of that extra prompting is helpful, whereas students who apply regular decision might not have the same maybe advice to be reaching out to us and showing that interest, which I know we'll probably talk about later on. So I think that that's like a main difference, is that you kind of have that second round to be able to really maybe tweak and add to your application. But yeah, generally speaking, it's 2 different deadlines, and whichever one works best for you is the one that you should go for.
Thanks, Erica. Rachel, I think you wanted to share something as well.
Yeah, ours is actually pretty similar to that. So we have early action, and I was going to mention the 2 kind of different: early action and regular decision. Our early action is November 5th, and then regular decision is January 15th. So very similar to UVM. There's just 2 differences though that I wanted to say for UMass. We don't have credential deadlines anymore. That's new for us. We just took those away just in the last year. But then with that being said, when COVID hit, we've been a lot flexible this year. So if you got your application in, by that early action deadline of November 5th, but then you didn't get like your counselor letter of recommendation until, a few days later, that's fine. We've been much more flexible this year. We changed that and then COVID hit, which was kind of funny. The other thing I wanted to mention is that early action for us really just means that you find out sooner. So kind of what Erica was saying, there's no benefit in terms of it's easier or harder. It's just that you find out sooner. And then the one difference that we have though with early action is that we actually no longer defer students from early action to regular decision. That's also a new policy. We just changed that a year ago. We're in our second year doing that. So what that means, if you apply early action, you can be admitted, unfortunately denied, or waitlisted. So you can be put right on the wait list from early action, which is different than how we've done it in the past and how a lot of schools do their early action. A lot of students will defer, which is kind of what Erica was talking about. So what that means is if you apply early action, that's just really something to think about. If you're a student who's waiting for senior year grades, you'll probably want to wait for regular decision in that case. You don't want to kind of apply early because you could be waitlisted. You don't have that backup option of sending in your senior year grades because you probably don't have them in November. So I just wanted to mention that those two things, just they're a little bit different for UMass.
Thanks, Rachel. That's super helpful. And that I remember when that switch happened last year, that was a big shift. So it's really good information. I'm glad you guys are getting that out there for families to be aware. Thank you.
I'll
Nick?
jump in as well, if that's all right, just because I don't want to, but I'll make things a bit more confusing because I envy Alexis because we have early decision, early action, early decision 2, and regular decision options. So a lot to choose from, which can be a bit confusing. In the end, because I hate this question just because it's so personal, right? Of like, if you're going to apply ED, it should be right for you and for your family and for the right fit, right? You should be ready academically to apply to college early if you are ready. That being said, there's no one way that will get you in that wouldn't otherwise, right? So it's like you apply when you're ready. But ED, so early decision, is that binding decision, right? Where you're applying, and you're saying that Northeastern is your top choice wherever you're applying to ED. And then if you are admitted, you're committing to go to that university, right? So that's a big commitment from you, from the family. So we kind of honor that as well, just saying that we know you're coming to us, so we want to kind of give you the benefit of the doubt and try our best to give you a positive decision. That's not to say it's any easier to get in or not. The pools of each decision style are drastically different as well, which makes it even harder to kind of compare and contrast. But this year, in the end, I think we'll end up admitting around 1/3 of our class through each different pathway. So 1/3 coming through early decision, 1/3 through early action, and 1/3 through regular decision. We do defer as well. So if we think you're a great fit, we just can't admit you early, we can defer you, and we will defer you. If we think you're not a good fit, then we will deny you as early as we can, which sounds horrible, I know, but really kind of trying to be as fair and upfront to students as possible. We do not want or like to string people along for a long time, because we know this is a pretty painful process for a lot of people, right? So from us at least, a deferral is a very good thing. And it's kind of an extra way to show your intent. And if you kind of are very responsive and saying yes to that deferral and emailing back, that can help you a lot, because we do track that as well, right? Kind of seeing how involved you are in the entire process. So a bit more complex, a bit more nuanced, but we have a lot to offer, a lot of different options.
Thank you, Nick. So as students are beginning to put together applications and they're starting to think about all of the different components that are then evaluated as you're reading their application, the essay is certainly one of those areas that causes a lot of angst for a lot of students as they're trying to figure out what they write about, how to write it, should they be getting support from other individuals, how much support, when should this all take place? I'm wondering if any of you have words of wisdom based off of reading thousands and thousands of essays every year that you'd like to pass along to families. Drew, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. I'll just say, first off, don't think about the essay right now. This is January of your junior year, but I will say, remember everything you hear about the essay tonight. Between now and December 1st of your senior year, you're going to receive so much advice about the essay, and almost all of it is worthless. because it's from people who have no insight or knowledge about the college admissions process. What you're going to hear tonight is the real stuff. We are the ones in the know. Everybody else, they're not likely to be in the know. So many students and families spend or probably waste a lot of time thinking about what they think we want them to write their essay about. I will save you that time. We don't care. Nobody in the admissions world cares one bit what you write your essay about. We read great essays every year on stupid, stupid topics. And we read horrible essays on what the guidebooks say is the great topic to write about. There is no connection between the topic of your essay and the quality of your essay. But there is a direct connection between how you feel about the topic of your essay and the quality of your essay. What that means is you will write the best essay on the topic you want to write about, not the topic you think you should write about, not the topic the guidebook says you should write about, not the topic your older brother wrote about a few years ago, and most importantly, and most disappointingly, not the topic your mother thinks you should write about. All of those could make a fine essay. None of them will make your best essay. If you have fun writing that essay, we will have fun reading that essay. Choose a topic you want to write about.
That's awesome advice, Drew. Thank you. Does anyone want to add to that?
I love that. That was awesome. When I started working in admissions, the first thing I did was pulled up my application, and I had thought I had this wonderful essay, and then I read it and I found it very embarrassing a few years later. So I just want to start out by saying that. There's a lot of different advice. I know, like, I've been in a panel session before where I've said something and have people completely disagree with it. I get frustrated by advice saying to avoid certain topics, because if it seems most like authentic to you, or it's something that you're most excited to write about, don't avoid it just because you think it's too generic or too overdone. Because yeah, like Drew said, we're going to read a lot of essays on a lot of different areas, and there's going to be a lot of overlap. Like, originality is hard to achieve, so it shouldn't be the like driving factor unless you are someone who like does like write very creatively. I also think that there's a lot of like even just like personal bias that goes into it. The essays that I find most enjoyable are ones that like that are, I don't know, maybe appeal more to like I like humor. So I like essays that I find humorous, whereas someone else might not care as much about essays that they find humorous. My favorite essay that I read last year had a title, What's the Deal with the Jumbo Size Jars of Mustard at Costco? I found that very entertaining, but that wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea. So really just like write what feels authentic to you. And then I think it reads more authentic to the reader. And yeah, like Drew said, also like you can't predict what the person who reads your essay is going to prefer in a topic or in a style. So really just do whatever speaks best to you. And I think that's how to have it come across best.
So with Clemson, we actually do not require essays. So we don't require essays, we don't require recommendation letters. It's literally just your application, your test scores, and your transcripts. That's all we require. So if you want to send us an essay, you can. I would definitely echo with Erica on being funny. I love reading a funny essay. In admissions, if we find something funny, we share it with each other, just so we can get that laugh for the day, because going through and reading so many applications, it does get a little tedious, a little tiring. And then you get that one funny essay that just like brightens up your whole day. So I would say just for Clemson in general, you don't have to be so formal when you're writing your essay. Just whatever you want to put down, whatever you want to write. Do that, what works best for you. But like I said, it's not required, but we do like to read them.
Thank you, Alexis.
I'll say my advice is just don't sweat it, right? This is one part of your application. It's going to be a big application, and this is just one tiny part of it, right? So I think a lot of stress goes into this whole essay thing. And I mean, it kind of should. You should put a lot of work into it. But in the end, again, it's one part of this application. It's more, I look at it as more of an opportunity for you, right? To show us who you are, right? This is not like a thing we're grading, but it's like your chance to branch out from the Common App, right? The Common App is a very formulaic kind of data-driven form you're filling out. the essay is the only time you can actually kind of write how you want to write. So use that how you want to, right? And kind of show us who you are. And I think for me, there's no one great way to write an essay because it's so different, but I love essays that really do like bring an application together for me as the reader of the application, right? So if you can show me in your list of activities in your resume, what you do, the time you spend doing it, kind of where your passions lie, and then somehow in your essay connect that all for me and kind of show me who you are as a person and make it much more personal to me. I love that kind of an essay. And that's, again, pretty generic, but I think in the end, this is your chance to show us who you are, like as a person, not just as a list of activities and a list of grades, but kind of use it as best you can, but don't get overly stressed about it because, again, it's a couple paragraphs, right?
Thank you, guys. That's great advice. Along other application materials that are submitted to most schools, so letters of recommendation. So our juniors obviously are in a position where they, at least for us right now, they are in hybrid learning. So they're still developing those relationships with their teachers. They're in school face-to-face with their current junior teachers twice a week. They have just started live streaming on the other days. So they're getting more face-to-face time, but behind a screen 3 days of the week and only face-to-face in person twice a week. So those relationships take a little bit longer to develop. Along those lines, obviously we ended school in March last year. So they've got some relationships with their sophomore year teachers, but perhaps not as well developed as they possibly could have been had we been in school for a full calendar year. So as our juniors begin to think about who they should ask for letters of recommendation, they'll ask teachers in the spring. Can you offer up any advice as to what you think might be helpful? Is it okay for them to go back to a teacher from freshman year if they really feel like they made that connection with a teacher from freshman year and they haven't had as much of an opportunity to develop those strong relationships either with sophomore year teachers or junior year teachers? Or is that too far back? If you guys have any thoughts on that, I know it's brand new for all of us right now. You guys haven't been in that boat with applicants yet either. So it sort of remains to be seen what it will look like. But if you have any initial thoughts, would love to hear them.
I can start. I think that's a really good point. And honestly, we haven't talked about that in our office yet. I'll be completely honest. We've been focusing, on this year with the seniors, and that's a really good point with the junior year coming up that, the half of your sophomore year was virtual and then potentially your full junior year virtual. So I think that for UMass, I obviously can't say this 100% for sure, but I've worked here long enough and I know that this year, this key term, the key word for this year has been flexibility. So I could totally see us just being so flexible going into the next year with the letters of recommendation as well. I've always said actually that so we require one letter of recommendation, which usually we've typically been saying needs to come from an academic source, so a counselor or a teacher. And I've always said that counselor or teacher could be somebody, whoever you have the best relationship with. If that was somebody from freshman year or sophomore year, that's great. If it's somebody from junior year or senior year, that's great too. It doesn't have to be the teacher of the subject you're planning on majoring in. If you hate math, but your math teacher was your best teacher, have it be from your math teacher. So I've always kind of said that, it's whoever's going to write the best letter for you and who you have the best relationship with. I also could see us, kind of going more into accepting more letters from outside sources. So, maybe you have a job and your boss is going to write you a letter, or your coach or a camp counselor or something like that. We always have accepted those, but I could see us, kind of in lieu of an academic letter, I could see us, taking a letter from a source from there as well. So it's really just an additional piece to your application. The letters of recommendation are really never going to make or break your application. It's always just like an additional piece for us. So I could see us being very flexible with that. Again, don't hold me to that, but that'd be my prediction.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, so speaking for UVM, we only require one letter of recommendation, and I'd say most often it's going to be from guidance counselor, and you all are really fortunate in that you have such a strong guidance department, so that you probably will be able to get very personalized letters, which is excellent. Not all students have that in their guidance offices. But yeah, so after that first required one, I often will see that students are submitting 2 or 3. And so it will be from teachers, from coaches, sometimes from employers. And the main thing that I look for often, like if I beeline to a recommendation, it's because I want to contextualize something that I read. Maybe I want more information on something, and often a guidance counselor can contextualize or corroborate something that was included in the app, but that's pretty rare. But something that I've heard that I found to be really good advice from a colleague in another panel session once is asking for a letter of recommendation, maybe from a class that, like Rachel said, it wasn't your favorite, but maybe one that you struggled in, but worked really hard on. If there's a class that you didn't necessarily ace every test, but you worked with the teacher outside of class, it took on extra work, any of that kind of experience, I think that that's really great because that person will be able to speak to how hardworking and dedicated you are. So there's a lot of different ways to approach a letter recommendation. My biggest pet peeve on application reading is when a student maybe doesn't include many activities or involvements in their application, but then the guidance counselor is listing all these things that they're involved in. And I'm thinking, why didn't the student put that? So my other piece of advice is if you're thinking about something that you're planning, if you're counting on your guidance counselor to include something in their letter for you, make sure that you're already talking about it yourself in the application. Don't rely on that being supplied by the guidance counselor. Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. Let's talk a little bit about standardized testing. So standardized testing obviously has been tremendously impacted by COVID. In the last year, we found that most schools ended up becoming test optional schools, at least for the year. So the junior class is obviously thinking about what's going to happen with their application cycles. So I'm wondering if you all might be able to speak just a little bit, again, recognizing that every school is going to be figuring things out. You might not even know what your policies are for next year yet, but if you do, can you share with us a little bit of information of if you did go test optional this year, are you going to remain test optional for next year? And if that's the case and it's optional, when some students are submitting scores and other students are not, how are the applications evaluated differently? While we're talking standardized testing, let's throw it all in there too. Obviously, there's been a lot of news from College Board in the last week that they are discontinuing the use of the essay and subject tests. And is that going to impact the admission process for our current juniors for you? Some of you may not have required those subject tests or essays to begin with, but obviously that is sort of weighing on people's minds right now where the essay is still offered for a couple more months. Should they take it? Is it worth it? Should they not? Based on your specific institutions. Alexis, I know that for Clemson, where testing is really part of the process, I think that it would be helpful if you could share a little bit of information. Maybe you can kick things off for us.
Yes, I can. So with Clemson, we have always required test scores in order for your application to be even considered for admissions. We did not make you take the essay portion or subject test, so that's always been our policy. It's still the same. However, with this year, COVID happening and a lot of students weren't able to take the test, we did decide to go test optional. We made that decision pretty late, but as far as some students did choose to send us their test scores. With that, you weren't looked at differently. So if your test scores helped you, we used them. But if they hurt you, we did not use them. So that's kind of how we did the whole process with COVID. As for next year, we haven't discussed yet if we are going to be test optional. So I'll say just keep a lookout for that once we get ready to start reviewing come the summer for the next class. But that's all that has really changed in our process, was just going test optional this year.
Thanks, Alexis. Rachel, I'd love to toss that one over to you too, and to see how this might be impacting the sliding scale that the UMass system uses. If you could talk about that a little bit, that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And we, very similar to what Alexa said, we always required the SAT or ACT, and we also went test optional this year. But we went test optional for 3 years. So we made that decision this summer. So for the juniors, you can, for UMass, not take the exam if you don't want to. I keep saying I think the juniors have this like unique year, at least for UMass, where you kind of get out of it. For us, you can just, not take it and not worry about it. For us, the seniors had this like weird in between thing where they were still trying to schedule it. But the junior class, I think, has this unique opportunity. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So we were test optional this year, and very similar to what Alexa said, we saw your test scores if they helped you. We did not see them in your file if they hurt you. If they were kind of lower at what we would project you to be at based on your academics and your rigor and things like that. So very similar to what Alexis was saying. And then for the sliding scale, honestly, it didn't really affect it too much. The sliding scale is basically, you all can Google this too if you feel like some wonderful light reading. If you Google the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education, it's a document online, and it's a lot of pages. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of good information, but it's a lot of boring information. And it basically goes through kind of what I was saying earlier about the requirements you need to hit, the 4 years of math in your senior year, that's all in there. The sliding scale is basically where the state system has you required to have a certain GPA with a certain test score. To be honest with you, that really only comes into play if your GPA is lower than a 3.0. And we do recalculate every student's GPA that applies to UMass. So we do give you more points for honors and AP. We only count your core classes and your college prep elective classes. So we don't count things like PE and health and things like that. So if your recalculated GPA is lower than a 3.0, that's really where those test scores come into play. And that's such a rare thing with our students who are applying. I don't want to say it doesn't happen, but we didn't see a huge change in that this year, to be honest with you. And also, even if you do not meet the sliding scale requirements, and again, you can Google the sliding scale. It's really hard to talk about it if you're not like looking at it because it's a legit scale. It's a GPA to a test score, and it kind of goes down the line. So if you did not meet the sliding scale, you can actually technically still be admitted. So that's why there's this weird in between thing where it's a state requirement, but there are some exceptions to it. So we actually honestly didn't see a huge change. Now I'm speaking to UMass Amherst specifically. I would predict that some of the other state schools probably did see more of an issue because they rely more heavily on the sliding scale because our averages and our requirements are a little bit higher than some of the other state schools. We don't come into this problem a lot, but I think some of the other schools rely a lot heavier on the sliding scale. So I know that was kind of confusing. I feel like that didn't make sense at all. It's like I'm a visual person, so it's much easier for me to explain this if you're looking at it. But again, you can Google the sliding scale and see that. But again, we didn't see much of a huge difference this year, even though we went test optional. I hope that made sense.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to digest, but thank you for sharing your information with us. Drew or Nick or Erica, would you like to share a little bit?
And this is the one area this is not new at Holy Cross. We've been test optional for 14 years. So we're reviewing applications the same way we always have. The one thing I will say, and one question I will answer, and this is so common, we've heard this for a decade and a half, is when families say, well, if we don't submit scores, then what do you think we did poorly, or what will you think about us? I think it's easy for me to say, no, we won't do that. But I think it goes back to a sort of a central fundamental understanding of what you do when you read a student's application. You consider the materials and the information that's in front of you. You don't think about the things you don't see. To make this sort of vivid, when a student mentions horseback riding when I read their application, I picture them on a horse. If they don't ever mention horseback riding, I never picture them on a horse. The same is true for standardized testing. If you mention your scores, we think about it. We just simply don't think about it because it's not presented to us. Now, can we evaluate a student with scores and without scores? The truth is we don't evaluate two students next to each other. We evaluate at Holy Cross 7,000 students next to each other. And we look at what you've done for 4 years. If you choose to withhold what you did for 4 hours on a Saturday morning with a number 2 pencil in your hand, it still feels like 4 years to us. So the best person to advise you about submitting your scores or not will be your guidance counselor, because you may submit your scores to one test optional school, but not to another. There's lots of, while policies have sort of loosened up, there's still confusion about this, about whether you should send scores or not. So really lean upon your guidance staff when it's time to apply, but understand that if you don't submit your scores, we don't think you did poorly. We just simply don't think about it.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, with UVM, we went test optional this year. Typically, we aren't test optional, and we have not yet made a decision about next year. I think that'll come in the coming months. So that's something that will be posted on our website. And if anyone's on our mailing list, then we'll let you know once a decision's been made there. We historically haven't looked for essay or subject tests, so the recent change doesn't affect us in our admissions at all. But thinking about, should I go test optional or not? I'm going to keep using the word nuance. Like Drew said, you should probably consult with your guidance counselor, or I'm not really one to, counselors shouldn't really be giving advice on that kind of thing. But if you really want to reach out to an admissions counselor and say, I'm concerned about this, then that could be an option for you. But I'd say, very broadly speaking, if you have a 3.8 GPA and an 1100 SAT, it might hurt you to submit your test scores. Whereas if you have a 3.0 GPA and a 1500 SAT, it could benefit you to send your test scores. So it is kind of variable in that scale, I guess. But like I said, we aren't necessarily going test optional yet for next year, but hopefully we'll be releasing info on that in the coming months.
At Northeastern, we are test optional, and we will be as well for next year. So that's great news for you. I think it's the key is just to do research and figure out which schools have which policies. I think I saw a lot this year where honestly students who should not have submitted testing, right? And in the end, our policy is if you submit it as part of your application, we will read it as part of your application. So that means it could hurt you to submit a lower testing. It could not hurt you to not submit testing, right? It could never not hurt you. So that has been I've seen that in so many examples this year of students who, I just say, look at our middle 50% averages or ranges of SAT of admitted students. It's very well publicized. If you fit in that range or at the higher end of that range, then by all means submit. If you don't, then just don't submit it, right? We cannot evaluate you for what you do not submit. And yeah, again, it can only help you. It can't hurt you to not submit.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This is very helpful information. I think at this point, there have been a couple of answers in the Q&A that, Stephanie, I'm wondering if you can share some of those with the group.
Sure. I would love to combine two of the questions. It's about college visits and also tracking interest at schools. So one of the questions came in about if you're not offering in-person tours, can students still visit campuses on their own, maybe with a current student there? And if you know when campus tours might be available again. But also with that, I think parents are wondering if you do track interest at a school. And now that students aren't going on college visits live and in person, if you're tracking virtual opportunities, or if there is a heavy interest, a heavy emphasis on interest.
I can start with that because I was going to say this actually earlier, and then I didn't want to drag it out. So with the visiting campus, I was going to say that I can only speak to UMass obviously, but UMass is actually an open campus, so you could come here and we would really never even know. You could drive through. It's not gated, it's not locked. The buildings are locked and the residence halls are locked, and that's all locked, but the actual physical campus is open, so you could drive through. What I've been telling students is that if you choose to do that, especially for you all, you're so close. If you choose to drive out and you walk around, we're not offering official tours, but just make sure you please adhere to the social distancing and mask wearing, policies, I guess you could say. So if you do choose to get out of your car, Again, no one's gonna, like put up there's no gate that we're checking your, your ID, but just make sure you wear the masks and you social distance. I will say this semester, students, more of our students are actually coming back. We were mostly virtual last semester, so it wasn't as big of an issue with people coming to campus, but we will have more students on campus this semester. So just be aware of that, if you choose to come like on a Tuesday afternoon, that's going to be a bit busier than maybe a Saturday morning or something, so just something to be aware of. I think just plan your trip wisely. And then in terms of tracking interest, we don't track interest at all. So that, virtual versus in person did not affect that process for us. I feel like I'm forgetting something. I feel like I was going to say something. Oh, I wanted to mention, we're also, again, because we're a state institution, we actually are bound by like the governor's rules for gathering. So that's really going to determine that's the question is, when will we have tours again? We are like right now, our campus, we're not able to have any events of people larger than, I think all events right now for our campus are canceled through the end of June. So until the governor changes that policy, because we're a state institution, because we're run by the state, that will be up to the governor and what the state says. So our tours are canceled, unfortunately, indefinitely. But we do have all that virtual stuff that was mentioned by Drew earlier, what he was talking about with the websites and everything. That's all for us, all on our website for those options.
Speaking as an out-of-state institution, don't visit. Don't come here. I'm sorry. Yeah, paying attention to state guidelines is going to be key right now. Vermont has gotten a lot of accolades, I'd say, in the past few months over how we've handled this pandemic. And, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are not one of the most populated states. We're actually the second least populous state. But Burlington is the most populous city in the state, and UVM is very intertwined with the local community. So we're not only talking about the safety of our students and our, faculty and staff, but we're also talking about the safety of our community. We had students return to campus. Those who elected to stay home were able to do so, but for the most part, students returned to campus in the fall. And one of our safety measures that was particularly, I think, excellent is that we had every single student was required to get a COVID test every single week in order to be on campus. That's going to continue in this coming semester. We did over 100,000 COVID tests and maintained a 99.95% negative rate. And a big part of that is because we have restricted campus to those who don't need to be on campus. So I would say really utilize our virtual visits. We've been working so hard on them, making them really excellent. It has a lot of involvement of the students, and it covers a lot more varied information. So we're really excited to offer those. And just pay attention to state guidelines, please. And our campus is pretty much shut down right now. No word on when we'll be offering tours again, but once again, that's going to be published on our website, and we will start reaching out to everyone once we can welcome people again.
So I'm going to echo everything Rachel said, just because Clemson is pretty much doing everything that they're doing. We're a public university, but we don't encourage you to come, but we also can't stop you from coming. Again, like Rachel said, their buildings are locked, so are our buildings. Eventually we will have tours, and it's going to be published on our website. Right now, we are not sure what that is even going to look like. I know it's in the works, but we aren't completely sure, but everything is closed and virtual. I mean, we have virtual tours. We tweak that every now and again to make sure you guys have a great experience. And then you can also hop onto our virtual office hours. So even though you're not able to come into our office, like if you were on campus, we still offer you guys the opportunity to stop by and stop in. So we have office hours Monday through Friday from 10 to 4. You can just hop on and talk to an admissions counselor, a tour guide as well, just to ask any type of questions you might have. Our virtual tours, I honestly think, are really great, just because our tour guides are so enthusiastic about telling you about Clemson. They go through an extreme interview process to be hired as a tour guide. So we have the best of the best tour guides, in my opinion, at Clemson, to just tell you about it. So the virtual tour is literally just like being on campus. It's just a little shorter, so it's about an hour long. You get an admissions presentation, and then the rest of that hour is spent just telling you about the different student organizations, like everything you need to know about Clemson's campus. So if you want to come visit, you just like be aware of the guidelines, wear your mask, things like that, but you won't be able to get into any of the buildings.
I just wanted to say real quickly, I think this is a great moment to mention, more so than ever. I think it's a great idea as you start to build your list of schools that you're interested in to sign up for their email lists. Yes, that is going to get you a stream of marketing messages that most of which you could probably ignore, but it also is going to become your news feed for these schools as they make announcements about availability of tours, programming for juniors, changes in standardized test policies. All of this news will come to your inbox. So as you build your list, as you add schools to your list, sign up for their email lists, and your inbox will become their newsfeed.
I'll echo that as well. I think well, at Northeastern, we are open for in-state visitors. We do have like one-on-one tours going off every once in a while. So if you do come to campus and visit, we can get you a student to take you on a tour. It's very socially distanced and pretty well done. It's kind of been, again, pretty quiet overall, but it's been successful. That being said, we also have that 3 info sessions virtually per day that are live, as well as all of our recorded content as well. So a ton online. In terms of that like demonstrated interest question, and do we track that or not? It's a tough one. We do track it, so we could theoretically see it. We see that you visited campus. We see kind of what you're interested in. It does not necessarily help you in your application, right? So this is kind of info that we have that could help potentially on the margins. In particular, let's say you're a deferred student and you are very responsive with your emails and with that kind of accepting that deferred offer, that could help you, kind of saying that you are very interested in us still, right? That could kind of push you over the edge, but really only on the margins, never kind of a make or break thing for Northeastern at least.
Nick, let me ask you the next question, just because it kind of goes along with the idea of interest, but also I think a little bit about student outreach. A parent wrote, Erica's shared a couple of times that getting in touch with the admissions counselor is helpful. Do most schools encourage outreach like this from students who aren't yet accepted?
Completely so, yes. I mean, again, I can't speak for most schools. I work for just Northeastern. That's all I've ever worked for. But at Northeastern, we definitely appreciate that. And I think, yeah, contact your counselor, look up who your rep is. Many schools will read or travel regionally, right? So you have one rep for your high school. Find out who that is. It's very easy to find out and reach out to them. And yeah, that can help a lot. And I think it's harder to track for us, kind of thinking of it from our point of view. If you've not yet applied, or you reach out to us and say, like, I'm a freshman in high school, I'm interested in Northeastern, that's great. Once you have an application, it gets like attached to your application. We kind of see that whole tracked communication from the get-go. So it helps to have applied already, but in the end, yeah, reach out to us early and often and kind of be that squeaky wheel. And it's actually good for us. It helps us and helps put like a human face on an application that we wouldn't otherwise know about.
Yeah, I realized that I forgot to talk about the interest part of the last question, so I appreciate the question that was asked. Yeah, this of course varies from school to school. UVM pays attention to interest. It's not something that makes or breaks an application typically, but like this year we had a really high increase in applications. So we've relied more heavily on which students are raising their hands, which students are showing interest, because in the end, colleges want to admit students who are going to go to that college. And in a time where students will send out applications to like 30 schools, it's hard to have another way to really realize like which students really want to be at your institution. So demonstrating interest is great. Reaching out to your counselor is great. I'd say my like specific advice, I don't know if this would be true elsewhere, is if you have a question that you want to be answered like same day, like if you just want information kind of quickly or you want to make a tweak to your application, I would say use our general admissions contact. because that's staff members who are spending the whole day responding to inquiries. If you reach out to your territory manager, I'm juggling a lot of different tasks at once, so it can be hard to be as responsive as I want to be to emails. So I'd also say, like, consider that. Like, if you're trying to establish a relationship, like, reach out to your territory manager. If you want information or something quick, then maybe reach out to the general department.
Thanks. One of the things we haven't talked about tonight really, and we're not going to get into it much, is financial aid and scholarships. We will offer a financial aid night in the fall for all of our senior parents through our guidance department. But two questions popped up kind of along those lines. And one was about if there are any opportunities to waive application fees, either by visiting a school or outreach to a counselor. And then on a separate note, somebody asked about if you apply early decision, does your acceptance package includes information about financial aid and scholarships?
I can start with that.
Sure.
So with Clemson, when it comes to fees, like waiving your application fee, you would want to do that on the application when you're applying to see if you meet the financial requirements to get your application fee waived. However, if you have other hardships where you're not able to, where you don't meet that need by filling out that information, you can always reach out to our admissions office and to your specific counselor, explain your situation, and you can receive a fee waiver that way. In our office, we all have fee waivers for those specific reasons, students that have specific hardships where they're not able to afford the application fee. And as for financial aid, and that's done with the FAFSA, and then with scholarships that comes in, you can receive a scholarship. When you get your letter, it's going to say, hey, you've received a scholarship. That will not tell you how much money you received. You'll get all that information in the spring. Later on, usually like March or April, you'll get that financial aid package and you'll receive your scholarship amount all at the same time. So your letter is just going to say you received something, and later on you'll get the amount.
UMass is the exact same with the fee waiver. So I'll let before Nick talks about ED, I wanted to echo that with us for the fee waiver.
Speaking of ED, yeah. So for early decision, so this applies to early decision and early action and regular. For Northeastern, at least, we send out decisions with that package attached to it. So you'll get your full financial aid package with your initial decision and have that to kind of work with on that decision and see if it fits for you. That applies to Northeastern. I'm not sure about other ED schools, but by and large, you will not be expected to deposit anywhere without having that financial information. So don't get too worried about that. But for us, at least, we do send it out with that initial decision.
Great, thank you. One other question kind of related to COVID is about extracurriculars. I think everybody knows that extracurriculars and kind of having a well-balanced high school career plays into the admissions process. So now with COVID and the pandemic here and students not being able to access some of their activities, what do you envision that looking like in this process moving forward? And you may not know, but again, just one of the questions that came up.
Generally speaking, sorry.
Arthur, go ahead. It's all you.
I'd say generally speaking, like, we don't want to disadvantage students due to changes that were beyond their control. Activities is a great opportunity to tell us about what you spend your time doing. So if I feel like a misconception that I had when I was applying to school was that I thought it could only be like organizations, like teams I was on or clubs I was in, but it also could be like, you could talk about the fact that you picked up bread making in quarantine. It can be that you have a lot of family responsibilities because you have younger siblings you have to take care of. So that's going to vary school to school. I don't know that all counselors are going to care about that information necessarily, but it's really helpful to know just like, what do you do? What are your interests? What are your involvements? And where have you maybe gone above and beyond in your time outside of class?
Yeah, I mean, the whole world is in the same boat, right? So there's not like an instance where we'll see a gap in your junior year involvement and be like, what did they do junior year? Like, we all know what you're doing junior year. I think this is an opportunity for you to go really above and beyond, right? Like if you are doing things despite COVID, that's like amazing, right? To see on an application of like, this student is still doing this despite being quarantined in their house, right? That's a great thing to show. Doing nothing is the norm, right? That's fine as well. But if you're doing extra, that just goes kind of further to show who you are and what your impact is, even during COVID. So again, not really negative because everyone's doing the exact same thing. If you happen to be a student who is doing something different and doing something, then that's great and show that.
I want to, I know we've been at this for almost an hour and a half, and I want to take the time to thank all of our admissions reps for joining us tonight. I also want to thank Mrs. Lodge tonight for moderating our event and doing this for us each year. We really appreciate it in our office. For those of you interested, the Medfield PTO meeting is tonight now at 7:30, and Mr. Parga and Mrs. Mendoza and Mr. Sperling are going to be talking about the new schedule coming up. So you can hop off this Zoom and jump onto another one if interested. But I think we got a lot of great information, wonderful information from you guys, the college reps, and we really appreciate your time doing this tonight. So thank you very much for joining us. And parents, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your guidance counselor at any point.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. And now nobody has to drive home. It's perfect. We'll definitely do this again.